Okay, turn to Judges chapter 11. Ceci and I have been reading together in the book of Judges lately. And there are many stories, many accounts in that book of Judges that are part of the history of the nation Israel at the time after they went into the promised land, before they had kings. And one of the key expressions in the book is there's no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eye. And generally speaking, when you have a group of people, large or small really, and everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes without either being guided by God himself and his word, or someone that is leading, sharing with them God's word, and endeavor to lead them in the direction that God would have them go, it gets kind of bad. But more specifically, I would title what I want to give it is Words Can Hurt People.
Amen.
And I think that's something that most of us have seen from time to time, and it's kind of, you see it in a very different light, or at least I saw it in a different light in this particular account. Jephthah is the man that God uses to get primarily the Gileadite, the Gilead, those in Gilead, from being taken over by the people of the land that were left in the land, the Ammonites, and they didn't want to be taken over, of course. The Jews didn't. And the account is really a pretty interesting account. But in that account, there's some words used that really did a lot of damage. And I think that we live in a culture where people are politicians, newspaper people, opinion alterers or modifiers, people that are trying to change people's opinion about other people or about other political parties, whatever, sometimes about other nationalities, other countries, other races, other political systems. And they use a lot of words that oftentimes can be very hurtful. Almost everyone that's trying to modify people's thinking today in the public venue use words to hurt people without consideration for whether the words are accurate or true or not. It doesn't make any difference whether what is said is true to the facts. Is it going to tend to hurt somebody's attitude towards somebody else? Most public figures today repeat things they heard about other people, in many cases knowing that they're not true, in other cases without bothering to verify whether they're true or not. Today, most politicians, at least in our country, promise to do things that if they were really thoughtful about it, they know they can't do. You know, we live in a time where there are people that try to get other people's vote because they're trying to convince them that they'll give them everything that a person ever wants, from the cradle to the grave and free of charge. And anybody that knows anything about really much of anything knows that's impossible. But it doesn't bother them. They use words to try to convince people that don't know better that that's what they're going to do. Today, many people make personal commitments to each other. Two people stand, let's say, before a minister or before a judge or someone, and they make commitments to each other. And it's, I guess traditionally you would say, and I know that it's not always in all marriage ceremonies, but traditionally they commit till death do us part. And whether that's stated or implied, that's generally part of the agreement. And yet, many of them have no, even the vague intention of committing to somebody until death do them part, particularly if they're not getting from the relationship what they think they should get, or particularly if they think they're not being approved or appreciated, or if they've been hurt, or things have been said, or the person is doing something that occupies more of their time than they think they should occupy in their profession or whatever it is that they do, then they bail. They made the commitment, in essence, till death do us part, but it's really till I don't think it's providing for my happiness the way I wanted it, and then I'm out of here. Today, people promise to do something or not do things to other people, whether it's in business, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in the way we treat each other. We make commitments many times in our culture without really any consideration as to whether we really are, even though we're stating it as though it's a commitment, we really are making a commitment. We may not be, many people are not at all. And so and I think the biggest, to me, the biggest danger and the worst thing that's happening in our culture today is if we are not there already, we're rapidly getting to the place where we really don't believe anybody about anything. And so you're skeptical of everything. And unfortunately, many people that are professing to be Christian churches and or Christian ministers do the same thing. They have not followed through on the commitments that they maybe at one time made in their life to serve the Lord, to please the Lord, and to live as a godly example to those around them, and therefore they have discredited the gospel of Jesus Christ. So when I read through this account and see what happened, and I look around me, I think, that's happening around us. Those same kind of either commitments made without thinking through, what am I committing to? Or commitments made, on the other hand, that's not the case in this story, but on the other hand, more common in our culture, people make commitments to do or not do things without maybe any intention of really doing or not doing those things. And so we live in a country and in a culture. What do you believe? I mean, everybody's selling something, it seems like. And everybody that's selling whatever it is that they're selling makes claims for what they will do or can do or should do. And in many cases, they know good and well they won't do it. Or they know good and well that in most cases, they won't do it. But still, they make those claims. In Judges chapter 11, we read in verse 1, Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a harlot. And you read that and you think, okay, so what difference does that make? In some respects, it doesn't make any difference. In other respects, it will indicate how the people that he's being raised with, his half-brothers primarily, how they're going to treat him. And sometimes how we treat people is influenced by what we consider to be their race, color of their skin, the education that they have or don't have, the money that they do or don't have, the ability to communicate effectively and in a social acceptable way or not. Those things often influence us, and in this case, the fact that Jephthah was a son of a harlot is going to affect the way he's treated in life. And when I go through this story, I originally was impressed by a statement that Jephthah makes in this story as being words or commitment that he made that hurt people. Hurt a lot of people, really. But then the more I read it, the more I thought, you know what, there's some other people that make statements in this account that it's going to hurt them too. And Gilead begot Jephthah. And that's his father. And Gilead's wife, in the second verse, bore sons. I don't know, I didn't pick up on how many. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, here's the first set of words that they're going to have to eat later on. You shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. Okay, obviously her father shouldn't have been with the other woman. Obviously the son should not have been born of another woman. But that isn't the son's fault. He didn't do anything to bring that about. None of us had anything to say about where we were raised. I've heard Ceci talk about her considerations as a child, which I have not had that kind of exposure, but where in the culture that she was raised in Peru, her father was comparatively wealthy in that culture, and they lived very well, and she had lots of presents and lots of gifts and good clothes and good medical care and nice shoes, and yet she knew little girls that were about her age that interacted with the family that didn't have enough to eat, didn't have clothes to wear, didn't have nice clothes to wear, didn't have good shoes, that oftentimes went barefooted when she wore good shoes. And she commented to me about, as a child, thinking, how come I have this place in life and they have that place in life? And the way she reacted to that question in her mind was to want to share or to want to give, and I think that's true to her disposition, her basic outlook on life. But there would be no way that you can change that up and down economic standard. And again, the question: the kids in either case had nothing to do with the economic standard they were born into. And yet they both are people. They both have the ability to love. They have the ability to be hurt. They have the ability to suffer pain. They know what fear is. And therefore, they likewise should not consider one up, one down because of the economic standard. But that's part of what we do in our culture. In this country, we had, primarily in the South initially, people that were brought from another country as slaves years ago. And people who did that tried to justify what they did by trying to make those people less a people or a person or of value or of importance or of deserving to be treated with love and kindness and consideration because they weren't quite completely people or something. But that's not true. That's not true. But from that culture came a way of talking about those people that was not good. And that in my lifetime, I have experienced in other brothers and sisters in Christ who spoke of other people consistent with those types of expressions concerning a person that's a slave. Has a different color of skin, came from another country, doesn't speak the language well, and that's hurtful to people. And it's not consistent with what we as Christians, to begin with, have in our heart, because that's where the speech comes from, and then what we should say. I think that what is happening over the years, as I've traveled across the country and back and forth, I've had the opportunity to be where somebody was telling what I will call an ethnic joke. And I've had the opportunity at times to say, you know what, that's really not appropriate for Christians. It's not. And I believe that the challenge is for Christians raised in an environment where the culture around us is deteriorating to the point that people don't believe anybody, or if we live in a culture that is deteriorating to the point that people are trying to hurt other people's value or the respect that they have from other people by the things that are said about them. The challenge is, don't adopt those thoughts, A. Don't adopt those expressions, even if we might adopt them at times to fit in. Be careful what we think and how we value and how important people are. In this case, Jephthah, in the eyes of his brothers, doesn't deserve to be part of the family. And he's not going to live with them. He's not going to inherit. You shall have no inheritance in our father's house. Because we don't have a common mother, really, is the bottom line. And then in verse 3, Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. Okay, so here's I don't know what age he was when he fled. Let's say he was, more or less mature, but he was probably young. The words that his brothers said to him hurt him. They hurt him. Also, the words that his brothers said came to hurt them. But at this point, they hurt him. And so he leaves, he flees. He doesn't just, it's not a happy departure that, I'm going to go somewhere and pursue my education and get a career and we'll be with you and we'll be sending you money if you need it. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was, you're not going to inherit. You're not going to live with us. And so he runs. He leaves. He flees. And then in the second part of verse 3, and worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out with him. In the italics in this translation, it said raiding with him. Now, whether that means that they went out and robbed people, I don't know. Whether that means they went out and became warriors to hire out to other people to help them fight their wars. I don't really know the details, and it's not really important other than it's not the ideal environment. It's not the career that most people would look forward to pursuing. And then in verse 4 it tells us that it came to pass in time that the people of Ammon made war against Israel. And it's interesting that when we say something or do something or have an attitude towards somebody or talk about somebody or to somebody in a way that is not edifying, we never know when it's going to come back to haunt us. We never know. We don't know what the end result's going to be. It's like the old expression, never say never. I don't ever want to see that person again. Well, someday you might. Well, I'm never going to let that guy inherit with our family and live with our family because he's the son of another woman, not our mother. Well, you might. And in this case, that's what's going to happen. So if we read on in verse 4, it came to pass after a time that the people of Ammon made war against Israel, and so it was when the people of Ammon made war against Israel that the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah. That's what makes me think possibly they were just a band of hired soldiers, that if you were a king or somebody and you wanted to go to war against somebody, you could say, hey, what's it cost to have you guys go fight for us? I don't know that, but that's apparently what the elders of Gilead had in mind. We're going to go hire this guy. They went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. So they sent him off. Now they're going to get him to bring him back. They need him. They recognize they need him. I assume that they recognize that he developed some skills that they, as they sat in their home together and inherited together whatever they inherited together, didn't develop when it came to war, for sure. And so they go ask for him. And then they said to Jephthah, verse 6, come and be our commander that we may fight against the people of Ammon. Well, what would you do if you were Jephthah in that case? These people just ran you off. These people said they didn't want anything to do with you, that we don't want you inheriting in us, we don't want you living with us. And because of the way they treated him and spoke to him, he flees. And he has a band of soldiers with him, and now they come, they want his help. And so he reminds them of something. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, did you not hate me and expel me from my father's house? And one of the things that I get from this is the importance of considering the consequences of words we say, attitudes we have, and hold on to. We might have attitudes that we look at and say, you know what, if I continue to have this attitude, this is not going to make me a very effective Christian testimony. If I continue to speak this way, this isn't going to be in anybody's best interest. And change. Or we can pursue an attitude or expressions or thoughts or feelings that we verbalize without stopping to say, what's going to be the end result of this? You know, two people in a marriage, they're having a discussion and they're not, you know, it's not coming together very good. And so one of them decides to tell the other one they hate them. I hate you. And of course, if it's the woman, then, and you never liked my mother either, sometimes follows. But those kinds of expressions hurt. And they will have consequences. Maybe the person will be able to rise above them, the expression, and go on without it breaking the relationship or destroying the relationship. Maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. And so Jephthah's brothers, they weren't thinking very well when they ran him off like they did. And so he says, okay, you hated me, you expelled me, and you ran me from my father's house. What's going on? You know, what's with you guys? Why have you come to me now when you're in distress? And it's really kind of interesting to me that as this story develops, the descendants of Ammon are accusing Israel of taking their land away from them when they came out of Egypt. And apparently Jephthah has enough knowledge of history, at least over 300 years of history, that he says, no, we didn't do that. We didn't take your land away from you. And he runs them through. I'm not going to take time this morning, but he runs them through, the people of Ammon. He runs them through the history of Israel coming out of the promised land, coming out of Egypt and going toward the promised land. And as they pass through different nations' lands that's occupied by them, ask permission. Can we cross through? No. Can we cross through? No. Can we cross through? And then somebody comes out to try to thump them, and they can't because God protects them, and they wind up occupying their land. But he wasn't a dummy. He wasn't an ignorant person. He wasn't an inarticulate person. And he knew how to fight, apparently. But he really makes them face their words. Why did you treat me that way? And now you want my help. Now you want my help. So then he says, okay, he's gonna capitalize on the opportunity in verse 7. So Jephthah says to the elders of Gilead, verse 9. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, if you take me back home to fight against the people of Ammon. So in other words, you guys want me to come back home now. And you want me to fight on your side. Okay. And if I fight against the people of Ammon and the Lord delivers them to me, shall I be your head? You going to make me the king or the president or the chief of your nation, your tribe, or whatever being your head included, or the head of your army? I don't know what, but whatever it is that going to be part of the deal? Or are you just going to want to use me and then tell me, okay, go? You came from another woman, and yeah, you did help us, but we don't want anything to do with you, and you're sure not going to inherit among us. Is that what the deal is? He's asking them. And the elders, at verse 10, the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, the Lord will be a witness between you and us. Okay, they're making a commitment before God. Again, some more words. If we do not do according to your words. Okay, so what they're saying is, you're the head. You win the battle, you're the head. And God will judge against us if we don't do that. Okay, again, words. I don't know whether they're thinking through or not, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I'm just saying, but that's a commitment. That's a commitment. And God made it clear to Israel, and we'll look at some of it in a minute, that if you make a vow or if you make a commitment and you don't follow through with it, then that's a problem with God. And that's not limited to the nation Israel, believe me. That's limited to mankind, as far as I know. I don't know much about what the challenge is for the angels, but I know that's mankind, not just one particular nation or people. So then, Jephthah says, okay, I'm on. And so he starts out by contacting the leaders of Ammon and saying, how come you come to fight against us? We're here in our land, you want to fight against us. And in verse 15, they said to him, thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away. And they said, because Israel took away the land. And then he responds, no, we didn't take away the land. We didn't take your land, the land of Moab, nor the land of the people of Ammon. And then he starts through the history of Israel's travels to their land. And I won't take the time this morning to go into that, but he doesn't accept their challenge at all. And they didn't try to rebut his explanation for why it wasn't because we took away your land. It's because you all wouldn't let us pass through it. And then one of you decides you're going to thump us, and you couldn't thump us because God gave us the victory. But then he makes a statement that is really, really foolish. It's really foolish. Chapter 11, verse 29. Let's start there. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. That's after he's given his history lesson and been rejected. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed through Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead he advanced toward the people of Ammon. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hand, then it will be whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. I don't know why he said that. Really. I mean, I don't know whether he thought that would motivate God to give him the victory. And if he did, I don't know why he did. Because he didn't know what or who was going to come out the door of his house when he got back home. What if it was his wife? What if it was his best friend? What if it was a dog? In which case, God wouldn't be interested in a sacrifice of dogs anyway, as I understand what God wanted in the way of animal sacrifices. He wouldn't want that. But I would have to say that either that was an accusation or not an accusation, but a commitment made in the heat of the emotion, or a desire to, I don't know. And I think that probably all of us, if we think back and look at things we've said or done, or commitments we've made, or things we said we weren't going to do, or we did say we were going to do and didn't do, or whatever, and say that was not very smart. That wasn't honoring to the Lord, or I didn't think that through. I didn't realize the effect that would have. Probably the sons of Gilead never thought through the effect that it would have to tell their, I don't know whether it was the oldest son, but their son by another woman, their brother, by another woman, their father's son. I don't know that they ever stopped to think through it. I wonder what's going to happen down the road if we run this kid off. Do we think, maybe there'll be some consequences. Maybe that isn't really right before God to treat him that way. I'll even suggest that maybe that's why God put them in a situation where they said, you know what, we need him back. I don't know. But the fact is, they came to the place that they said, this, our half-brother, has something that we need right now. We need his leadership in battle against the Ammon and that nation. But he made that vow. And so he went into battle, he fought the battle, he won the battle, he went home. I don't know whether he thought as he was going home, I wonder who's going to come out the front door, or what's going to come out the front door. I don't know whether that ever entered his mind or not, but it should have. It should have. Because he made a vow to God, and his words hurt a lot of people. First off, it's going to be his daughter, who happens to be the one that's going to come out the front door first, if it was a front door. He hurt her mother, for sure. She apparently had friends that were reasonably close friends, because before she gave up her life, she spent 2 months with them. And her father's going to hurt. And he expresses it. He realizes really quick that that was not a good thing to say. That was not a good vow to make. But he made it. And actually, when I read the account, we'll read it, but I get the feeling that he kind of turns the blame on her. I don't, maybe it's the way it reads to me, but I don't appreciate the way he does it. And I think that quite often we do that when we make a commitment or make an expression or say something with our mouth that's hurtful to somebody. We generally tend to kind of mitigate the responsibility. By that I mean limit our responsibility or accountability. But in Numbers chapter 30, and before we get to the end of the story, think about a couple, 3 passages. And verse 2, we read, if a man makes a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement. He makes a commitment to do something. And I like I say, I think of the politicians, I think of salespeople, of advertising people, the news media in our culture. They make all kinds of commitments as to, we're going to give fair, balanced news. We're going to give the truth. We do the greatest and finest investigation and everything to fact check the things. And they know they're lying through their teeth in some cases. Law enforcement agencies that go before courts and swear that something has been validated when it hasn't been. And when that becomes so much, it permeates our culture to the point, as I said, I think we're all getting to the place that we don't believe anybody. I don't hear a lot of stuff. And those of us who use computer much, I guess my computer's no different than yours, but it's got to where you can go on Amazon and look at something you want to buy, and an ad for something, some insurance company, some food supplement pops up on the screen. And I've noticed they've hid the thing to get rid of them. You can't hardly find the X so that you can send them down the tubes. They're wasting their time. I don't even look at it. All I'm looking for is that X so I can get that thing out of the way, and I can go on and buy my brake linings or whatever it is I want to buy, or my paper or whatever. So what people say, it really has hurt our whole culture. It hurts our whole culture. That's one of the reasons to me it's so important with parents and children that parents don't commit to do things for their children that they can't do, and that they do commit that it is by them a vow made to God. In other words, if any man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. And as far as I know, Jephthah looked at it that way and did it. I mean, it's not that he didn't do it, he did it. So that's not what I'm halting him with. But what I'm wanting us to get a concept of is what's in the next passage I want to look at is Psalms 15. And you start at verse 1. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Actually, it's more better spelled out. More better. Ooh, that's wonderful English. It's more surely spelled out in the next verse. But let's do this one. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? I would say, who wants to be in fellowship with the Lord today? Who wants to be in fellowship with the Lord? Who wants to have communion with God that's not broken because we've made commitments and not followed through on them? Because that's what he's going to say. When you do that you don't live in his high hill and holy hill, and you don't come to his tabernacle. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? Verse 2 says, he who walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. And I think that's an interesting, in his heart, that's where it starts. That's where it starts. You know, I've had people, you say, why did you say that? Oh, I didn't mean anything by that. I just said it. No, come on. Come on. There's something behind it. Why did you say that? Why did you say it in your heart? Why did you say it in your heart? So again, he who speaks the truth in his heart, who does not backbite with his tongue. We live in a culture of backbiting. The news, the video, if you watch any kind of entertainment, backbiting, maligning, discrediting, falsely accusing, is what it's all made about. Dishonesty. Deceiving somebody about something. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against a friend, his friend. He doesn't take up a reproach against his friend. What goes on, as I said earlier, in the media? What goes on among people in politics? What goes on about between people in business? What goes on between people in law enforcement at times? In whose eyes a vile person is despised. And then it ends with, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. I think in my notes, I blacked out a phrase there accidentally. But, because I'm not trying to get rid of it. But it ends with, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. I go back, I remember in the early years of my life in the construction business, landscape contracting to start with, that I was a partner with another brother, Corey Grant. Some of you here knew him before he went home to be with the Lord. But we often bid jobs. And when you bid a job, sometimes you miss something, or forget something, or underestimate how long it's going to take to do something. And so you wind up in a contract with an agreement. In that case, most generally there's a proposal and a plan and a set of specs, and ultimately winds up in a contract with a price in it. And we might look at the price and say, you know what, we're not going to come out on this one because we forgot that, or I didn't notice this. And I have been in a situation where the general contractor didn't specify that we do something because somebody else in the project was supposed to do it, and then tried to say it was our responsibility. So that thing can work two ways. I know Gordy and I used to tell, we bid it, that's the price we gave, that's what we're going to do. And we did it. And so it's important that we have a commitment between us and the Lord, that if I say I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it. Even if I lose money on it, if it's a business situation. Even if really it's not convenient right now, but I told the kids I would do it, or I told my son I would do it, or my daughter, or whatever, or I told my wife. It's really important that we have a commitment between us and God. To not hurt people with the things we say, the attitudes we have, the expressions maybe that are negative to a certain ethnic race or certain skin color or whatever the case may be. Iowa's never lived in the South, but here in Southern California, there can be those that have feelings against those that are just across the border. And we all know that there's a lot of stuff that's said sometimes that isn't uplifting, it isn't right for Christians to think in their heart, things like that, and then to say them. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 2, Solomon said, "Do not be rash with your mouth." That's what Jephthah was. He was rash with his mouth. Do not be rash with your mouth, and let your heart utter anything hastily, before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on the earth. Therefore, let your words be few. Sometimes better not to talk if we're going to say things that we haven't thought out. So, going back to the war's over, Jephthah's victorious. It's a time of rejoicing. Right? And in chapter 11, verse 34, Jephthah came to his house in Mizpah, and there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing. A really happy time. Her father's been to war, he's coming back alive, and he's been victorious. And she's excited and happy. And he shot up his big mouth and said, whoever comes out the door first, I'm going to offer a sacrifice to God. Why? I don't know why. But I know, as I said, that there's going to be a lot of people hurting. And there are. But it compounds as we go on in the passage. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her that he tore his clothes and said, put yourself in that place. That's to me, it's kind of like thinking about the Apostle Paul when he struck down on the road to Damascus, where he's going to arrest people to believe in Jesus Christ, and the voice in heaven that he recognizes the Lord Jesus says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It's hard for you to kick against the bricks. Who art thou, Lord? I'm Jesus, whom you persecute, whom you reject, whom you're trying to destroy, the people who believe in me. I'm sure that was, because all we know about the Apostle Paul, Saul of Tarsus before he was named Paul, he was a zealous man. He believed in what he believed, and he believed that Jesus Christ was an imposter. He didn't believe he was the Messiah of Israel. And so he was trying to stamp out those people diligently. And then to all of a sudden be shocked to realize, I'm speaking to the Lord. Who are you, Lord? And the Lord says, I'm Jesus, whom you persecute. What a shock. For Jephthah, what a shock. His daughter comes out the door with singing, and she's dancing, she's happy. He's coming home alive, he's coming home victorious, and he knows that he's made a commitment to take her life. Not knowing who it was going to be, but who it turned out to be. And it came to pass when he saw her that he tore his clothes, and he said, alas, my daughter, you brought me very low. I think you got it wrong. I think I brought me very low would have been more appropriate. But because his daughter didn't have anything to do with it. His daughter had nothing to do with the commitment that he made. She had done nothing wrong by coming out of the house to greet him enthusiastically and singing and with music and dancing around. No. She brought you very low? No. You did it yourself. You did it to yourself. And he goes on, you are among those that trouble me. No, she didn't trouble him. He did. For I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot go back on it. And he's right, he couldn't. But for us to think about it and learn from it, okay, to think about what we're going to say, think about how it's going to affect other people, what kind of commitment we make, and what are going to be, and what is the likelihood, or even the vague possibility that I'm not going to be able to do it. And I don't know that I always do, but I've made it a point when people ask me to do something or I'm going to commit, I'll try to do that. I hope I can get it by then. I'll work, if it works out, I'll do it. Because I don't want to make commitments that I can't follow through on. And it's better not to make a commitment than to make a commitment and not follow through. It actually, the verse that I was reflecting on earlier is in Deuteronomy 23:21. It's in a different order than I thought it was in the notes, my notes. But it says, when you make a vow to the Lord your God, Deuteronomy 23:21, you shall not delay to pay it. Whatever it is, whatever commitment you make, do it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it would be a sin to you if you don't. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be a sin to you. In other words, don't open your mouth and overload your back. Or, looking at it from a different perspective, don't open your mouth and hurt somebody when it's not necessary. Don't belittle somebody. Don't put somebody down. Don't make somebody feel like maybe they're unwelcome in your home. Certainly, Jephthah knew how that felt. If you abstain from vowing, it shall not be a sin. That which has gone from your lips you shall keep and perform. For you voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. You did it. You did it. Jephthah did it. His daughter didn't do it. And so if we go to the end of the account, we find that she asked for 2 months, and he gave her 2 months, and she spent that 2 months with her friends. 37 of chapter 11, Judges 11. Then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go and wander in the mountains and bewail my virginity, my friends and I. So he said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months, and she went with her friends and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. And it was so at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he carried out his vow with her, which he had vowed, and she knew no man. And it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. He could have, his success in fighting against Ammon wasn't predicated on that vow. He didn't need to make that vow. I don't know why he made that vow, but it doesn't make any difference. What he did was commit himself to do something that he really didn't even know what it was, because he didn't know who was going to come out that door. He didn't know what was going to come out that door when he first returned back. And so you go back to you know, the expressions that we have in Scripture relevant to the words of our mouth and the meditation of our heart. Well, what was he thinking about? What was he thinking about? And for us, what do we think about sometimes maybe if we say things and then we back off and say, why did I say that? Or we say things and people are hurt. And sometimes we say things and people are hurt and we don't know it, because we don't hear about it. So it's important that when we speak, when we commit, or when we say and evaluate or rebuke or talk to somebody, that the thoughts of our heart, up here, thoughts of our heart, control the speech of our mouth. Don't just open up your mouth and talk. Don't just open your mouth and talk because emotionally you feel angry, hurt, bitter, resentful. Be careful. Think, how is this going to be perceived? And the thoughts of the heart should always reflect the wisdom that is from above. So if our thoughts are, the thoughts of our heart reflect the wisdom that is from above, and our mouth portrays for all who hear to see what's on our heart, it'll be edifying. It'll be helpful. It'll be a blessing. It'll be faithful. Now, sometimes it may not be what the person wants to hear, but it'll be done in a way that they should want to hear it. In other words, the tongue should reflect what we have in James chapter 3 and verse 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy, and good fruits, without partiality, regardless of nationality, skin color, position in the world, economic, educational, otherwise, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's a verse that we all should at least have the truth of memorized if we don't have the verse memorized. But the wisdom that is from above is pure and peaceable, gentle, willing to yield. It's not my point, my opinion, my way. And some of us, as we get older, get more opinionated, I guess. We shouldn't, probably, but we do. Full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. If the communication that goes on between people in our world, the society that we live in, were that way, it would be a much, much different society, believe me. But that can't be, because the majority of this, at least 50%, I would say, of our society, our culture, rejects the fact of God outright. So that's not going to happen. And it's going to get worse and worse. And therefore, it's going to be harder and harder for those of us who are not there to not bend and adapt and adopt the tactics and the attitudes and the speech patterns and things that the world does. We need to have the prayer in our heart as we communicate, as we commit to, as we promise, that the words we use, and I'm kind of drifting away from the thought of the content so much as the way, are as sweet, to use that term, as the situation allows. In Psalms 19:14, the psalmist said, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart." See, we may never say anything out loud, but we may have all kinds of things going on in the mind of our heart that God judges. That's where He judges it, and that's where it's so important to look at it as a Christian. That okay, so I keep my mouth shut, but if I said what I said, I think I'd like to cut your throat. If I said what I really felt, okay. But if I hate my brother in my heart, I've committed murder already. If I lust after a woman in my heart, I've committed adultery already. God deals with us on the level of what we think, what we want, what we don't want, whether we're careless, whether we're diligent, whether we're conscious of what we say and what we're thinking and how we come across and how it affects people. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Proverbs 16:21, the wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increases knowledge. To whatever degree I've learned that, I wasn't born that way. That wasn't the environment I was raised in. My mother's side of it was, but my father's wasn't. The sweetness of the lips increases learning. So if you have to tell somebody something, you think you just have to tell them that might offend them, do you actually ask the Lord, help me to say this in the sweetest way I can say it? Do you? Really, do you? Do I? And I'm not just speaking to you, because I said a minute ago, I didn't start there. The sweetness of the lips increases learning. And I think I can get in somebody's face about as bad as anybody else can, if I choose to. But I hope I never choose to, unless it's absolutely necessary. Matthew 12:37, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Luke 6:45, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. And I think when we look at the media, when we look at the politicians, when we look at a lot of the earth movers and shakers in our world, it's pretty obvious. What comes out of the mouth reflects what's in the heart. For out of the abundance of the heart, I'm quoting again, I'll go back and do the whole thing. The heart, out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. And I guess I'll close with these two passages, but this thought. May God help us not to emulate the speech of the world around us. But it's pretty hard not to. It's pretty hard not to. If you're around people that curse all the time, it's pretty hard not to catch yourself, maybe not saying it out loud, but thinking. At least that's my experience in being around people at times when I have been, where that was true, that it's hard not to think the way you hear other people around you. In Psalms 52:2, the psalmist speaks of those whose tongue devises destruction like a sharp razor working deceitfully. That's pretty terrible. And I haven't gone to James, who speaks about the tongue as like a little rudder on a big ship, or a little spark of fire in a forest, and it can't be tamed. It can't be controlled, and I believe it can't unless we allow God to help us control it. Psalms 57:4. My soul, David said, is among lions. I lie among the sons of men who are set on fire, whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue is a sharp sword. It's really important what we say. And I'm sure Jephthah, after he come back from his victory with Amnon, almost if not all of the joy and the gratitude of the Lord was almost totally wiped out by regret and sorrow and loss. And when you stop and look at the ripples, it just kept going on and on and on. Yeah, sure. It was his sorrow. It was his daughter. It was his wife. It was her friends. And apparently in Israel for, I don't know how many, maybe they still to this day, set aside a time, 4 days each year, to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. I don't know. But may the Lord help us, because we all interface with people. We all interface with each other. We all interface with new people that come among us. We generally, when people come among us, they require more time, more attention. Sometimes they have lack of understanding in a lot of areas. But may the Lord help us to let the words of our mouth and the meditation of our heart be acceptable in His sight. And then may what we say and what we do, share that with others. And we're only going to be successful in that if we stop and think about what we feel we need to say, what's going to be the consequences of saying it. Are we the one to say it? Is the way I'm going to say it as sweet as it possibly can be put? That's my prayer for all of us. That would be my prayer for the country, except that I know that's not going to be. Because as a country, we really never were a Christian nation, and we never will be a Christian nation. But there have always been Christians in the nation. And they should be strangers and pilgrims, and they should live by a different standard than the majority of the population in the country. I'll stop. Your thoughts?
Robert?
Yeah.